Some women are intelligent in the conventional sense. They know how to read a room, handle situations, and build their image. But there is another kind of intelligence, rarer and deeper, the intelligence of a woman who has awakened from her social role. In a constantly shifting world, where women must navigate between expectations, prejudices, and the pressure to succeed, the truly strong woman is not the one who bends most skillfully. According to Jung, she is the one who holds fast to her inner axis, a steadfast anchor that never wavers amidst the ceaseless storms of the external world. This woman no longer strives to become someone else. She is simply returning to herself. And that journey, as Carl Jung would say, is the greatest privilege of a human life. So, what sets her apart? The answer does not lie in external circumstances. It lies in 7 core principles, guiding compasses that wise women always carry with them. Not because these principles make them successful by ordinary standards, but because each one helps them remain true to themselves in a world that constantly demands conformity. And if you are ready, we will begin with the first principle, the foundation of every profound life journey. Let's start. Rule 1. They live with why, never controlled by what. There is a truth few dare to face. Most of us do not truly live from understanding ourselves. We live from reactions. Reactions to social pressures, to others' expectations, to standards of success that are not our own. We rush to choose a career for its salary, love someone for short-term satisfaction, or live in a city because it seems reasonable. But a wise woman does not live by reaction. She lives with awareness. And it all begins with a seemingly simple question. Why? Why do I truly want this? Why do I choose this path over another? Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This is the first and ultimate principle of a wise woman. She lives from the inside out. The world may be noisy, but within her there is always stillness. Because she does not define herself by the what, she defines herself by the why. What is the goal? Why is the motive? There is a fundamental difference between motive and goal. You cannot drive a car by merely staring at the destination. You need fuel, an engine, and a reason to keep going despite obstacles. Those who live without a why often fall into 2 states, either running endlessly out of fear of facing emptiness or freezing because they don't know where to begin. But a wise woman neither needs to run nor fears standing still. She knows that each step she takes is moving towards something deeply meaningful. The why, the profound reason, the root of all actions, is an inner source, the psychological center Jung called the self. When a woman discovers her why, she no longer needs to race after images, roles, or social labels. She walks to her rhythm, slowly but surely, quietly but undeniably present. Imagine you are a compass in a desert. Winds blow, sand swirls, visibility blurs. Without a sense of direction, you chase mirages. You may think you're on the right path, only to end up lies not in what we achieve, but in who we become in the process. Wise women don't need glory to feel fulfilled. They need truth, the unity between their outer actions and inner motives. Every decision they make passes through a soul filter. You can fake a smile, but you cannot fake inner peace. And a woman who lives by why has a peace that draws attention, not because she speaks loudly, but because she cannot be shaken. Rule 2. They never trade self-respect for recognition. But living from within is not just about finding your why, it's about protecting it from the sweetest temptation, external recognition. Here, a wise woman makes a resolute choice. I may lack many things, but I will never lack self-respect. Modern society has a subtle but powerful mechanism. It praises likability over integrity. Women are taught to be agreeable, soft, accommodating, and sometimes to compromise themselves to keep the peace. A woman who politely declines a suitor is deemed arrogant. A female employee who doesn't smile and jest with everyone is called unapproachable. A woman who demands her rights is labeled rebellious. These all send a covert message: choose to be liked over being respected. But a wise woman is not fooled by the fleeting allure of approval. She understands that external recognition is like a gentle fog, enveloping you in comfort, but the longer you linger, the more lost you become. It is not light, it is the illusion of light. Every time you earn praise by bending yourself to fit, you aren't loved. You've just signed a temporary contract, trading a piece of your worth for a nod of approval. The danger lies in how these compromises often start small. Jung called this identification with the persona, the social mask we wear to gain acceptance. The persona is not inherently bad, but if you mistake it for your true self, you begin living like an actor trapped in their role. You do things you don't truly want, and each time, a small part of you shrinks, dims. This is the fragmentation of the soul. Lady Gaga, a woman who has won countless music and film awards, once lost herself amidst the glare of fame. In a candid 2025 interview on The Howard Stern Show, she shared, "There was a time when I lost myself. I lost myself in fame and people's opinions of me." She described feeling as though everything, spotlights, expectations, even admiration, was eroding her true essence. In the years when millions celebrated her, she felt the emptiest. I was so focused on what people thought of me, and I had to take responsibility for how much I let that affect my self-worth. Fame, instead of strengthening her, made her doubt herself. She began living for what others wanted to see, not what she truly believed. The turning point came not from a grand victory, but from the courage to pause and ask, if people love me, but I don't love who I've become, then who am I performing for? That question needed no answer. It was a wake-up call. Lady Gaga rebuilt her relationship with herself by shedding what was false, stepping out of her role to return to her essence. In another interview with them, she stated, "I had to bring myself back. It wasn't about being famous anymore. It was about reclaiming my essence." From then on, she stopped chasing recognition and began pursuing inner unity. Not everyone dares to stand amidst the world's applause and admit, "I've lost myself." But that is the mark of a wise woman, one who refuses the role to preserve her self-respect. Perhaps you've had such a moment, a role, a silence, a time you made yourself smaller. If this resonates, don't hesitate to share a few lines below. Your words might be the first step to freeing yourself. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because accepting yourself means embracing even the parts that don't please others. That requires courage. But wise women do this daily. They don't need everyone to love them. They only need to look in the mirror and know they haven't lost a part of themselves somewhere along the path to their goals." And the irony is, when you no longer need recognition, you often earn deeper respect. People sense you cannot be swayed. You don't perform for approval. You have boundaries, and boundaries are what transform your presence into strength, not a performance. This is why a wise woman has never and will never trade self-respect for recognition. She knows recognition comes and goes, but self-respect is the only thing that keeps her whole in a world that wants her to change. Rule 3. They never ignore their intuition. There is a quiet truth that wise women always understand. Self-respect may keep you grounded, but intuition tells you when to walk away. If self-respect is the inner flame, intuition is the silent wind guiding your path. In a noisy world, a wise woman does not lose her way because she has learned to hear the softest whispers of her soul. Refusing to live for recognition is a big step, but refusing to ignore your intuition is an even braver one. It requires trusting what has no ear, but the self continuously signals. The more you live connected to your true essence, the clearer your intuition becomes. The more you live in a role, the fainter that voice grows. Intuition is not the vague hunch people often assume. It is ancient data encoded in immediate emotion. It's what your ancestors used to survive, to escape predators in the forest, to know who to trust and who to avoid. And though we now wear suits, hold smartphones, and sit in modern boardrooms, that system still operates silently beneath our civilized veneer. So why do so many ignore it? Because intuition lacks evidence, logical reasons, or accompanying reports. And women, in particular, have been taught to rationalize everything, to justify their emotions logically, to avoid being seen as emotional. Does someone make them uncomfortable? Maybe I'm just too sensitive. A relationship feels off? Perhaps I'm expecting too much. So they stay, months, years, until the damage is clear enough to be documented. A wise woman doesn't wait that long. She acts on the first warning, not because she's better than anyone else, but because she's learned a costly lesson from herself or others. Intuition is the first whisper before everything shatters. You may lose an opportunity by listening to your intuition, but you won't lose yourself. And a wise woman knows her worth lies not in the opportunities she seizes, but in the times she refuses to betray herself to seize them. Rule 4. They never shrink themselves to fit. However, to live fully as oneself, it is not enough to heed intuition. It requires the courage to refuse to shrink for the sake of fitting into others' expectations. Because sometimes you don't take a wrong turn, you simply step into a space too small for who you are. Carl Jung called this the retreat of the unintegrated shadow. When you fail to embrace your entire self, both light and darkness, strength and weakness, you show the world only the most digestible parts of yourself. And the rest? You bury it alive in silence. Wise women do not. They have learned, often the hard way, that every time they shrink to be accepted, they drift further from their true essence. They understand, if I must become a smaller version of myself to exist here, this is not my place. Shrinking doesn't always stem from fear. Sometimes it masquerades as wisdom, maturity, or being reasonable. Society teaches women that to be loved, they must be soft. To be accepted, they must fit. To be kept, they must not make others uncomfortable. But wise women reject these unspoken deals. They don't pass through doors designed for others by stooping. They build their doors. Their image is not that of a bird singing in a gilded cage. They are a bird that knows it was born to fly, even if that makes it harder for others to keep them close. Because they understand, fitting in should never come at the cost of inner freedom. From Jung's psychological perspective, shrinking oneself is not just a social act, it is a refusal of individuation. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but becoming whole. And that wholeness includes the inconvenient, the loud, the elusive, all that society often labels as too much. Wise women don't see themselves as too much. They see the world as too accustomed to small women. Viola Davis, the renowned Hollywood actress, once shared that in the early years of her career, she tried to soften herself, tone down her intensity, and be less outspoken, just to fit into the acceptable image of a feminine black woman in Hollywood. In her article, "This Isn't the 50s Anymore," Vanity Fair, February 2016, Viola Davis spoke about the true meaning of living from one's authentic self. She emphasized that being yourself is the most precious gift in life. And sometimes, to hold on to that, you must sacrifice many things, including the approval of others. Sometimes it only takes one person daring to share a moment when they shrank themselves to inspire another to stop doing so. If something within you is yearning to speak, don't suppress it. It might reach someone else who has been silently shrinking, just as you once did. This is powerful proof that fitting in may give you a place to stand, but only truth gives you a foundation. Wise women don't want to enter rooms where they're only welcome if they stay silent. They want to walk in with their full voice, edges, sharpness, and even their discomfort, because that is who they are. And the beauty is, when you stop shrinking, you don't make others as uncomfortable as you might think. Instead, you offer them an invisible invitation to expand themselves, step out of their roles, and live a little more authentically. You become a reminder that another kind of life exists, one of truth, unshaped by external gazes. Rule 5. They don't compete, they resonate. The moment a woman dares to expand, refusing to shrink to fit, she will soon face another wave, a silent comparison, an invisible tally. Does she have more than me? It's no longer a fear of being small. It's a fear of not being the most radiant woman in the room. Wise women understand. A skilled violinist doesn't diminish a piano's value. A low note doesn't threaten a high one. But when both play their parts with the right tone, the harmony reaches depths no single instrument could achieve. In psychology, constant comparison creates what's called a scarcity mindset, the false belief that success is a limited resource, that if she has it, I lose. But wise women live with an abundance mindset, where another's growth doesn't diminish them, but expands their worldview. A successful woman doesn't threaten them. She reminds them that many paths are possible. Perhaps the clearest evidence of how deeply competition is ingrained in our psyche is how we, women, sometimes become the first to fire arrows at one another. No grand scandal is needed. A fashion choice, off the mark, an unfiltered photo, a clumsy remark on a talk show. Suddenly, a beloved woman becomes a target, not by men, but by other women. You may have heard of cases where actresses, cherished for their relatability and authenticity, stumbled with an awkward comment in an interview and became the subject of vicious online attacks. Not for insulting anyone, but for not meeting the standard of the feminist icon the public assigned them. The harshest critiques didn't come from male-dominated media, but from women's forums. From one imperfect sentence, an entire judgment was torn apart about their morality, intelligence, and worth as a person. This isn't just a scandal. It's a painful manifestation. Instead of standing together to grow stronger, women have unconsciously learned to step on one another to stand firm. Instead of seeing a woman stumble and offering a hand to lift her, they see an opportunity to affirm themselves by tearing her down. But a woman who lives from her essence is different. She doesn't see another's mistake as proof of her superiority. She sees it as a reminder of human complexity and imperfection. She knows no one needs to be perfect to be worthy of love. She understands women don't need to be flawless icons to be defended. And this creates an impact greater than any competition could. Because the energy of resonance spreads, it doesn't just make you bigger, it lifts the entire room. The truth is, when you don't need to outshine anyone, you naturally stand out. And when you stop comparing, you have the mental space to create, collaborate, and walk a path that is yours alone. Wise women don't measure themselves against others. They measure themselves against who they were yesterday. Because they understand the only victory worth pursuing is the victory over themselves, over pettiness, envy, and the need to be the best. Rule 6. They do not stay silent when their soul needs to be heard. The resonance among women does not stop at merely being present together. It lies in allowing each other to speak. And in this society, sometimes the bravest act is not doing something grand, but speaking the truth at the right moment, even with a trembling voice. Shifting from comparison to silence is a subtler retreat. When a woman no longer strives to outshine others, she might withdraw out of exhaustion or because her voice has been stifled too many times. But wise women are different. They understand. There are moments when, if you don't speak, your soul begins to erode. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Awareness never arises from comfort. It emerges through conflicts, through moments when you want to stay silent, but the soul within screams. And wise women do not silence that call. They choose to stand. Not always to resist, but to preserve the connection between their inner voice and the outer world. Silence is not always noble. Sometimes it is a deliberate self-erasure. It's how a brilliant, intelligent, deeply feeling woman chooses to retreat after being mocked, explained away, or labeled too sensitive. But wise women understand. Every time you stay silent when you should speak, you teach others how to overlook your soul. There are moments in life when you feel like a solo performer standing in a grand auditorium, the spotlight glaring in your face, thousands of eyes waiting for you to play the right note. But instead of touching the keys, you step back. Not because you've forgotten the music, but because you know, if you play on, you'll lose your feeling. That is a choice only those truly honest with themselves dare to make. To pause when the world demands you keep going, because you refuse to betray yourself to please the applause. You leave the stage not to give up, but to protect the deepest part of you that hasn't yet healed. If there's a moment in your life when you stayed silent, not out of calm, but because something inside you broke, then you likely know this feeling best. And if you're thinking of that moment now, let it flow out in a few shared lines. We are always ready to listen. Wise women understand that sometimes silence is a compromise, but other times, speaking is what saves the soul. And they choose to speak. Not with fists, not with arguments, but with the raw honesty of truth. Like that performer, they dare to stop, even knowing they may be booed, forces them to shrink, soften, silence, or perform a lovelier version of themselves. They walk away. Not because they don't need love, but because they don't need a love that costs them their self. From Jung's perspective, love is one of the most powerful contexts for the unconscious to operate. In relationships, we easily project, seeing in the other the unintegrated parts of ourselves. We love someone because they make us feel whole. But that's not love. It's seeking a missing piece of ourselves in another. And when they can no longer reflect what we expect, we're disappointed, not because they changed, but because we never truly saw them. Every woman has likely fallen into this trap. They loved someone because that person made them feel special. They sacrificed too much, compromised, and woke one day asking, "Who am I in this relationship?" And that moment awakens the deepest part of them. True love doesn't make you disappear. It makes you more visible. Wise women don't confuse attachment with dissolution. They don't think love is we are one. They think, I am me. You are you. And if two independent beings can walk side by side without losing each other, that is love worth keeping. Consider the social phenomenon where women, even in 21st century East Asian cultures, are still expected to soften in marriage, be less busy as mothers, or not be too strong to maintain household balance. Phrases like, "A woman who outshines a man makes him uncomfortable," or "Why be too successful? No one will dare love you," still echo, as if capability is a burden and radiance is something to dim. But wise women don't blur themselves to keep love. They understand that true love doesn't demand you dim your light, but requires the other to be strong enough not to fear it. In psychology, losing personal boundaries to sustain a relationship leads to psychological fusion. There, the other is no longer a loved one, but a place where you anchor your entire identity. And when the relationship cracks, you don't just lose them, you lose your sense of self. Wise women avoid this by maintaining healthy psychological boundaries. They love deeply but don't fall freely. They dare to dialogue, disagree, and keep their voice because they know if you can't disagree in a relationship, you can't truly be present in it. For them, love is not a melting, love is an expansion. Both stand, grow, and breathe in a space wide enough for each to remain themselves while being part of each other. No one teaches us how to become ourselves. Most of what we learn is how to become an acceptable version. But in the shadow of all those expectations, a voice always whispers, "Is this all I am?" These 7 principles are not a template. They are ink marks on your inner map, so when you're lost, you can find your way back. Sometimes you will stray. Sometimes you'll shrink, stay silent, compare, or love the wrong person. But what makes a woman wise is not that she never loses her way. It's that she doesn't stay lost for long. Jung said the journey to oneself is a journey out of a predetermined fate. It's not glamorous. It's often lonely. But every step toward your true self is a step that pulls the world closer to truth. And if anything lingers after all this, it's perhaps a small question, enough to guide you far. Is everything I'm doing today bringing me closer to or further from myself? If you have an answer or are still searching, this video and the journey ahead are for you. Don't leave without a like, a subscribe, not just to support, but to mark that you've chosen to begin a journey of living authentically, deeply, and uncompromisingly as yourself. Imagine a moment when you can no longer pretend. The mask you've worn for decades suddenly feels heavy and suffocating. The roles you once embraced, the praise that once brought you joy, all of it turns into a meaningless game. Do you think you're slipping into depression? No. This is awakening. Carl Jung devoted his life to observing and documenting this mysterious process. He realized that spiritual growth doesn't come from bold declarations, but from the gradual letting go of what no longer belongs to you. It's not that you try to release, rather, your soul rebels, expelling layers of pretense. What once felt familiar becomes unbearable. What once nourished you now feels like a burden. This is not rebellion, but evolution. It's when your true self begins to rise, reclaiming its rightful place. And on that journey, you will slowly let go of many things you once thought indispensable. If you feel increasingly out of place with your old way of life, if your soul is quietly whispering, "Enough," then this message is for you. What follows are 7 things that truly awakened souls gradually release. Stay until the end, for you may well be on this journey without yet realizing it. Part 1. Core explanation. What does quit mean here? When you hear the word quit, you might immediately think of abandoning a habit, ending a relationship, or leaving an environment. In everyday language, quit is often tied to determination and effort. I must stop. I must resist. I must strive to break free. But through Carl Jung's lens, quit in the spiritual journey takes on an entirely different essence. It's not a forced act of will, but a natural withdrawal from what no longer aligns with your soul. Picture a dish you once loved, but over time your body begins to reject. Though your mind may still crave it, each bite triggers a violent reaction in your stomach. At that point, you don't need to forbid yourself from eating it. Your body refuses it for you. The soul, in its awakening process, works similarly. Habits that once brought comfort now stifle you. Beliefs that once served as pillars become chains. You no longer choose to let go. You simply cannot hold on any longer. Jung called this the intervention of the self, the deeper, greater essence beyond the conscious ego. The ego always seeks control, clings to the status quo, and fears dissolution. But the self operates to a different rhythm. It's like a hidden life force, quietly rising, pushing falsehoods to the surface. Thus, quitting is like spring arriving, melting the ice, or like a growing body naturally shedding baby teeth. It happens without force, inevitably. The challenge lies in the complexity of human psychology. During this quitting phase, you often feel intense inner conflict. One part of you yearns for truth, while another clings to the safety of the familiar. For example, you may have grown accustomed to seeking approval. Every compliment, every approving glance once fueled you. But one day, you realize those things only exhaust you. Your mind may still urge you to try a little harder to please others, but your body rebels, your chest tightens, your voice catches, your hands tremble. This isn't weakness, it's your soul signaling. It's time to stop. The key to understanding is this: quitting in the awakening process is not a loss. It is according to Jung. Before diving into the specifics, think of letting go as the natural breath of the soul, exhaling what is old to make room for what is true. The next part is a path with 7 clear turns to help you recognize where you stand. If what you've just heard resonates deeply, comment, "I'm ready," so we can continue together with the 7 things spiritually awakened souls gradually release. Number 1. the craving for acceptance. From the moment we're born, we're taught that our existence depends on the gaze and approval of others. A child smiles to earn a mother's praise, studies diligently for a teacher's recognition, and as an adult, dives into the whirlwind of achievements, fame, and rewards. The mind gradually equates external validation with self-worth. We come to believe, if no one acknowledges me, I am nothing. Carl Jung saw this cycle in countless patients, calling it dependence on the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted, which obscures our true self. When awakening begins, something strange happens. Your body and soul can no longer tolerate the game of pleasing others. Where a compliment once lifted you for an entire day, now the anticipation of praise exhausts you. Where you once bent over backward to fit in with the crowd, each act of pretense now feels like a lump in your throat, as if you're betraying yourself. Jung described patients experiencing this as a soul allergy. The effort to be accepted instead of bringing comfort creates nausea and anxiety. Imagine it like this. Someone addicted to sugar once found joy in every sweet bite, but one day their body develops an intolerance. Each once delightful pastry becomes poison. Chasing acceptance is much the same. It used to sustain you, but as your soul matures, it becomes a burden. This doesn't mean you instantly become confident and indifferent to others' opinions. On the contrary, the early stages of this letting go are often excruciating. You may find yourself caught between two worlds, no longer able to beg for approval, but not yet strong enough to fully rely on your inner worth. Like someone quitting smoking, you may still crave the high of praise, but your body won't let you go back. This is a conflicted transition. You stop posting for likes, but still anxiously check your phone. You no longer beg for compliments, but feel a pang when they're absent. Jung believed this phase could last years, an essential part of the spiritual maturation process. From a psychological perspective, this is a shift from external to internal validation. Jung called it the birth of inner authority, not the societal confidence that compares and measures against others, but a deep-seated sense that I exist, and that is enough. To see the difference, consider two scenarios. One person speaks in a meeting, their eyes darting to the boss for approval, their words shaped by others' reactions. Another speaks in the same meeting, voicing what they believe is true, their voice trembling but their gaze steady. The first speaks from an ego-craving validation. The second speaks from the self, from an inner truth that needs no proof. The difference isn't in eloquence, but in this. One needs external confirmation to exist. The other already feels their existence from within. Of course, letting go of the craving for acceptance isn't always smooth. It often brings loneliness and pain. When you stop chasing, you may lose attention, affection, and even relationships built on that foundation. But as Jung emphasized, the death of the persona is the condition for the birth of the self. Like a snake shedding its old skin, the pain is the price of a larger, truer self. Number 2, the obsession with being special. If the craving for acceptance is the first chain binding the soul, then the obsession with becoming special is the second chain, more subtle, harder to detect. It's like a new mask for the ego, donned just as you begin to leave behind the need for recognition. You may no longer crave consensus, but you quietly nurture another illusion. I am different. I am superior. I am more special than the masses. Carl Jung observed this phenomenon in many patients during the awakening process. He called it the inflation of the ego under a spiritual guise. This is a stage where many mistake it for a leap forward, when in reality, it's just the ego changing colors. Instead of seeking external validation, the ego begins to cling to the idea that one is different and superior to others. It's a comparative obsession. I no longer want to be like the crowd. I want to prove I'm better than them. Imagine someone just starting a meditation journey. New experiences, the stillness of mind, lucid dreams, or miraculous coincidences fill them with excitement. Instead of keeping these as a silent treasure, they begin subtle boasting, sharing on social media, weaving into daily conversations, implicitly sending the message that I'm living on a higher plane of awareness. This isn't malice. In truth, it's the ego's natural reaction to accessing new energy. But that's the trap. Instead of letting go, they don a more It simply flows in its direction, and because of that, it is unique. In practice, you may recognize this process through small signs. Before, you might have enjoyed telling others about a strange dream you had, as proof that you're touching deeper realms. Now, you keep it silent, realizing the experience doesn't need validation. Before, you might have craved being called knowledgeable, profound. Now, you're comfortable being seen as ordinary, even nothing special. That's not self-deprecation, but freedom from the chains of comparison. Number 3, the performance of happiness. However, even when you've let go of the need to be special, the ego doesn't vanish. It cleverly dons another shell, seemingly harmless yet incredibly subtle, the mask of happiness. After ceasing the need for recognition and the effort to appear different, the ego finds one last way to survive. It cloaks itself in the radiant mask of endless joy. In today's society, the pressure to be happy has become an invisible command. From social media overflowing with smiles and perfect moments, to toxic positivity culture teaching us to always be strong, optimistic, loving life, all create a massive stage where people are forced to play the role of the happy person. And for those entering the spiritual path, this mask is polished and even more refined. The awakened are expected to be gentle, compassionate, radiating peaceful energy, always rising above worldly sorrows. Yet Jung pointed out a truth. This very performance of happiness is anti-spiritual, for it separates us from the full reality of life. Jung once emphasized, no one can achieve wholeness by imagining themselves as light, but only by confronting the shadow. That means pretended happiness never leads to growth. The truly awakened no longer find interest in powdering and painting over pain. Instead, they allow themselves to be sad, angry, afraid, hurt, and importantly, they dare to let others see that truth. Imagine a friend who always appears optimistic. Whether losing a job, breaking up, or falling ill, their go-to phrase is, "It's okay, everything has its reason, I'm fine." At first it sounds positive, but if you're perceptive, you'll see their eyes drained of life. This is the performance of happiness, a mechanism to avoid emotions, using fake light to cover real shadow. Jung would call it spiritual bypassing an emotional form, using noble declarations to escape human experiences. From a psychological view, the performance of happiness is a defense mechanism like wearing armor to protect from hurt. But paradoxically, the more armor you wear, the further you are from yourself. Repressed emotions don't disappear. They're pushed into the unconscious, becoming shadow. And as Jung warned, whatever we deny in the unconscious returns in life, often in distorted forms: anxiety, depression, addiction. Pretended happiness, therefore, is not protection, but a path to breakdown. True spiritual awakening leads to a different state. Instead of trying to be happy, we accept the full experience. When joyful, we truly enjoy. When sad, we truly grieve. When in pain, we dare to admit and let it flow through. This doesn't make you negative. On the contrary, it makes you more whole. For the truth is, joy only has meaning when we've tasted suffering. Light only shines when we know darkness. Think of a melody with only one note. Even if it's the most cheerful note, if it plays forever, the music becomes boring and meaningless. It's the silences, the low notes, the melancholic passages that create richness in the melody. Life is the same. The truly mature don't seek to play a continuous, happy tune, but dare to play the full composition with its low notes and pauses. When you begin to let go of the performance of happiness, something profound happens. You no longer feel ashamed of suffering, rush to paint everything pink. You learn the courage to say, "I'm not okay," without feeling weak. And in that authenticity, a new kind of joy emerges. Not the flashy, showy joy, but a quiet, deep joy from living fully as yourself. Number 4, the need for certainty. And then, when the mask of happiness has fallen, the ego seeks another anchor to cling to: certainty. For if it can't pretend to be joyful, it will seek security in absolute answers. But right there, a new challenge begins. Those entering the awakening process gradually discover that what once reassured them, the immutable truths, the clear definitions of self and world, suddenly become fragile. Someone who once affirmed, "I know who I am," begins to feel lost in themselves. Someone who once believed firmly in life's meaning or purpose becomes confused before the void. This isn't disorder, but a sign the soul is growing. Jung called this state stepping into mystery. When you let go of the need for certainty, you open space for life to be experienced as it is, without needing to be boxed into formulas. He once said, "The bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual." At the collective level, people need certainty to function, but at the personal level, to touch the self, you must dare to face the unknown. For the future or the past, you begin to live in the present, where life truly happens. Jung believed this is the shift from rational mind to intuitive wisdom. The mind always wants a conclusion, while intuition knows truth is never fixed. We've journeyed halfway together through the ego's most subtle masks, watching it shed layer by layer. If you're still here, it means a part of you truly craves transformation. I want to pause a moment to thank you for listening and accompanying, for these topics aren't easy. They touch the depths of fears, the fragilities we often avoid. It's your patience and courage that make this journey alive. And if you feel these sharings are nourishing you, gently press a like as a silent nod and subscribe to continue with us in the next part. From here the journey deepens, touching what Jung called the shadow, where real challenges begin and where true light is born. Number 5. Blaming others. In the collective unconscious, blaming is an almost instinctive reflex. As children, we blame our friends for ruining a game. As adults, we blame parents for not raising us properly, teachers for not understanding us, society for its injustices, partners for betrayal, or circumstances for holding us back. Blaming offers temporary relief. It explains our pain, keeps us in the role of victim, sparing us the bitter truth that we too play a part. Jung observed that the more tightly we cling to blame, the more trapped we become in a cycle of suffering. Blaming is like clutching a burning coal. You believe that by holding it, others will be scorched, but in reality, you're the one burning. It's a subtle form of self-torment, where we mistake asserting "I'm right, they're wrong" for true liberation. Jung pointed out that only by daring to drop that coal do we create space for inner healing. A woman who follows our channel shared that she carried resentment toward her abusive father her entire life. Each time she faced failure in work or relationships, she silently thought, "It's all because of him, because of that unhappy childhood." Her resentment may have been justified in terms of cause, but it also made her a prisoner of the past. During therapy, she was invited to look again, not to deny her pain, but to see that her resentment had become part of her identity. She had fused herself with the victim role. Only when she recognized this could she begin to step out of her father's shadow and reclaim agency over her life. From a psychological perspective, blaming often aligns with what Jung called the shadow. When we refuse to face our own flaws, mistakes, or unconscious desires, we project them onto others. For instance, someone who constantly complains that everyone is selfish is often the one avoiding their own hidden selfishness. By blaming, they keep their self-image clean, but at the cost of growth. The awakened gradually face a painful truth. Blaming endlessly changes nothing but prolongs suffering. They begin to look inward and ask, "In all these situations, what was my part? How did I unconsciously contribute?" This question doesn't negate the responsibility of those who caused harm, but restores power to oneself. For when you see your role, you also gain the ability to change. In the spiritual journey, letting go of blame marks a major turning point. By ceasing to accuse, you begin to see the complex interplay of souls. No one is merely a perpetrator or victim. All are playing roles to awaken one another. A betrayer may mirror your own lack of honesty. An abandoner may teach you to stand on your own. Every wound, no matter how cruel, holds the potential to be a gateway to your true self. Painfully, letting go of blame isn't a single moment, but a process. You'll still feel anger, still sense injustice, want to shout, "It's not my fault." But over time, that cry softens, making way for a deeper realization. You cannot change the past, but you can change how you narrate that past to yourself. And that's where freedom begins. Number 6. Spiritual bypassing. Yet as blame begins to fall away, the ego seeks another refuge, more cunning and harder to detect. It cloaks itself in spirituality to continue evading. This is the most dangerous mask, for it wears the guise of nobility while subtly avoiding life itself. Jung observed this in many spiritual communities. People use lofty phrases, "Everything happens for a reason," "We are all one," "Let go of the ego," "Suffering is an illusion," to hide the fact that they haven't dared face their raw pain and very human existence. He called this a form of spiritual defense, where spirituality becomes a tool to escape reality rather than engage with it. Imagine someone who has lost a loved one. Instead of allowing themselves to cry, they maintain a calm tone. They've returned to the universe. Everything is perfect. The words sound wise, but their eyes glisten with suppressed tears. Here, spirituality becomes an escape, a way to deny true emotions. And as Jung warned, anything pushed into the unconscious returns, often with greater destructive force. From a psychological perspective, use spirituality as a shield, but as a light. You don't hide in silence to avoid dialogue, but use silence to listen deeply. You don't use egolessness as an excuse to shirk responsibility, but to love while maintaining healthy boundaries. In other words, you don't use spirituality to escape life, but to live it more fully. And at that moment, another subtle challenge emerges. A sense of separation from the world. It no longer feels like avoidance, but wears the proud guise of being above others. Number 7. Smug isolation. Awakening often begins with a sense of alienation. You notice shallow conversations become meaningless, old relationships no longer resonate, and habits that once brought joy now evoke emptiness. This feeling is real. You're like someone waking up in a room full of people still fast asleep. Naturally, you begin to withdraw. At first, this separation is necessary. It gives you quiet space to understand yourself, to protect your fragile inner process. But the problem is, many get stuck here. They start believing their solitude is proof of their superiority, that I can't connect because I'm too awake. And they're not. This is smug isolation, a subtle prison the ego builds, cloaked in spirituality. Jung believed the ego uses difference as armor to avoid confronting very human vulnerabilities, the fear of rejection, the need for connection, the pain of exposing imperfect parts. Instead of admitting, I'm afraid no one understands me, the ego turns that fear into pride. I'm too different to fit in. But as Jung noted, this pride is merely a way to avoid the shadow within. Imagine someone withdrawing entirely, no friends, no interactions, immersed daily in spiritual books. They believe their solitude is a sign of wisdom. But in truth, beneath that awakened surface may be a trembling heart, afraid to be seen in its weakness. Smug isolation, therefore, is not awakening, but a form of ego protection in spiritual guise. Jung observed that those who continue this journey gradually realize a truth. Loneliness isn't the fate of the awakened, but merely a phase. For as you learn to face your own shadow, you slowly shed the hidden pride of, I'm different. And then, something miraculous happens. You begin to reconnect in an entirely new way. The spiritually mature don't connect from lack, but from fullness. They don't need others to fill a void, but share from wholeness. They don't need everyone to understand them, for they've learned to accept themselves. This acceptance makes it easier to empathize with others. You can sit with someone unawakened without feeling constrained. Instead of judging them as asleep, you see yourself in them, the unconscious parts, the mistakes, the shadows you once had. Smug isolation is like a towering mountain, standing grandly amidst clouds, but cold and alone. In contrast, connection after spiritual maturity is like a river. It too originates in the mountains but flows to the plains, merging with the earth, nourishing life. The mountain may pride itself on standing apart, but the river truly touches everything. Remember, Jung never called for dissolving into the crowd for acceptance. On the contrary, he emphasized individuation, becoming a whole individual. But he also noted that individuation doesn't mean isolation. A mature individual stands alone, yet connects without losing themselves. They enter relationships not to perform, gain recognition, or appear special, but to transform together. By letting go of smug isolation, you realize awakening isn't an escape from the world, but a return to it. a return to everyday conversations, to seemingly mundane relationships. But this time, you show up with an open heart and a fresh perspective. You no longer see yourself as above or below anyone. You simply see, we are all human, all stumbling, all yearning, all seeking our true selves. Awakening doesn't demand you become someone else. It only asks you to be brave enough to hear the voice that's always been there. As the layers fall away, don't rush to replace them with new slogans. Permit yourself to pause, to rest between old answers and the life unfolding. In that silence, the true self often whispers small but precise guidance. If you want to start now, choose a simple ritual. Each evening, place a hand on your chest and ask your body 3 questions. What made me feel alive today? What made me shrink? Where will I be honest tomorrow? Write them down, unedited, unadorned. Alongside, keep a dream journal and try a minute of active imagination. Close your eyes, invite a dream image into dialogue, and listen without judgment. And at least once a week, find a trusted witness, a friend, a therapist, or a listening community to share your raw truth without needing to be right. You don't need to rush. Every bloom has its season. Honor both the sorrow of parting with the old self and the lightness of freedom. Both are signs you're on the right path. When doubt arises, don't chase more affirmations. Return